Hi, I'm Connie Spurlock, and I'm going to show you a few things today that you can do with a 10-degree ruler. This is a 10-degree ruler, which means that the angle of the ruler is cut at 10 degrees. If I'm cutting wedges of fabric with this ruler, it also means that 36 wedges will be necessary to make a circle, because there's 360 degrees in a circle, and this is 1/36 of that. The ruler is made in Arizona, so it's US made. The numbers down the middle indicate the measurement. It's 22.5 inches long. It also indicates the straight of the grain. The only mistake that can be made in using a 10-degree ruler is by not cutting it on the straight of the grain. The numbers and letters are lasered in, so they're never going to wear out, and this 1/4-inch seam on both sides indicate your seam allowance. Projects that we're going to make is a 40 to 42-inch table runner. It could be made using wedges where you're sewing big ends together to get a curve, or you could sew not so many wedges together to get less of a curve, or if you alternate those wedges, you can have a straight edge. Off with today is 3 pieces of fabric. Each are 11 by 18. If you had 3 fat quarters, you could make 2 of those table runners that we just showed you. The ruler is green because the 2 hardest colors to see in fabric with a clear ruler are white and black, and you can easily see that the ruler is transparent for easy cutting for you. When we cut, we'll take our fabric, layer it up. I usually do somewhere between 3 and 5 or 6 layers of fabric. I'm going to start on the right-hand side because I'm right-handed. And when I take my ruler and lay it on top of the fabric, this is the straight of the grain. I can know that because it's parallel to the edge of the fabric. Also, there's horizontal lines here, and the horizontal lines will be exactly on the edge of the fabric, or they'll be parallel to the fabric. So when I make my first cut, I'm going to make sure it's on the straight of the grain and cut however many pieces of fabric I have into wedges. Now it would be difficult as a right-handed person to come over on this side because I'm crossing over. So one time only, I flip all of the fabric at once around to the other side, and now I can easily cut a wedge here and flip it around. Cut the next wedge here, and I'm always cutting on the straight of the grain, and I can always see my lines at the bottom to know that I'm doing that. So as much fabric as you have, as many wedges as you need, that's how you'll cut. When your wedges are finished, for a curve, big ends go together. So when I lay one wedge on top of another, right sides together, big ends together, and stitch, when I have a curve, I'm going to stitch from the small end out to the edge, press it and fold it, and I'm going to pick up my next piece, lay it on top, stitch it from the small end out, and continue to do that until I have the curve that I want. The maximum curve that I can make is 8 wedges, because 9 wedges would be a 90-degree angle or quarter circle, and I could not swing back around. So you can see that we've put 8 wedges here, and then we turned it around and started by putting, there's the big end, by putting this here. Now we're stitching this way, and we're going to come back for 8 wedges that way. And we'll continue to do that until all of our wedges are used up. In this case, that will be 3 sets of 8. 2 things are going to make a curve the sharpest that it can be on your table runner. One is that when you start cutting, you're going to always start at the small end. So when we had our fabric, we started with the tip of our ruler at the edge of the fabric. But on another project, I could start somewhere else. I might start where that is marked 8, and then every wedge, as I turned it around, would be cut on the 8. And that would give me a gentler curve than what we have here. If I don't put so many wedges together, there's 4 wedges. When I put those together, here's the first 4, and then we flip it around, there's the next 4, and I'll just do it in segments of 4, that's going to give me a gentler curve. So you can see in the comparison here that this is a sharper curve because it has more. This is because if you would like to have a table runner that has a straight edge, that is made by putting a big end to a small end and stitching, and alternating those will give you a straight edge like this. When I start out that I would like to have a straight edge table runner, I have a little bit more freedom than when I had the curve, because I'll start the same way and I'll line it up on the straight of the grain. I'll cut this off and then I'll flip it around. But now I could cut a wedge like this. When I flip it around, I can cut it anywhere on the ruler. If I'm making a curve, whether it's a circle or a placemat or a table runner, it always has to be cut in the same place. But if I'm making a straight edge, I could cut some on the 9, and when I flipped it around, wherever it landed, that would be okay. When I flipped it back around to cut, it would be on the 3. So every piece of fabric, you can see this is larger than this one, and there's some others in there that are different sizes. So you have a little bit more freedom. When I get my table runner done, I'm going to finish it up by layering it with batting and backing. And this is how it will be, and I will press it well. And then I drew you out a little paper here. This piece of paper represents a piece of batting, bigger than the table runner. Also a piece of backing the same size. The backing is right side up. This is the wrong side of my table runner. And I'm going to stitch all 3 layers together and then turn them right side up. I'm going to start at the edge. This is the wrong side of the table runner. I'm going to stitch in 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to stitch on my machine through all layers all the way around until I come back up to here. And I'm going to stitch out back to the edge, and when I started, I stitched in 1/4 of an inch. Now I can take my scissors and cut right at the edge of the fabric all the way around and turn it right side out. And you can see on this one then that the edge is finished, and if I choose to bind it, I will be able to do that after I have turned it. It's much easier to put a bias binding on a curve, and it's also much easier to bind just a straight edge binding if the edge of your project is already finished. There's lots of different projects that you can do with just a few wedges. Here we put another table runner together and turned it the same way so that edge is finished. But the scraps that we had left over, which were just a few, we made a placemat. So you could also make something like a pot holder, or if you didn't have as large size wedges as these are, you could just put wedges like this to put that together. Christmas always looks good with using wedges, and in this case we used the wedges to make a table runner, and then we did the binding. We could also use those Christmas colors and put 36 together, and that would give us a full circle, of course, which we could have made them larger and made a table centerpiece, or we could have made a Christmas tree skirt. We'll cover that in just a minute. There are several ways that you can accentuate the wedges. Here are some wedges that we put together. You can see that a big end is next to a small end, which is, of course, going to give us a straight edge. But we could also take 1-inch strips and put those in between each wedge as we sewed it on. If we wanted a faster, easier way, we could take a piece of ribbon and just lay it right across that seam and do a decorative stitch on each one of those, and that would glitz it up a good amount. A fun project that you can make, those we don't want in there, if they're in there, take them out. Oh, we took 5 fabrics and cut these different colors, and we sewed those together, a big end to a small end, which is going to give us our straight edge. And then we took our 10-degree ruler, and always keeping with having it on the straight of the grain, we now cut our wedges this way and cut across our fabric, cutting those wedges. And when we put that together, that gives us about 150 to 60 pieces of fabric in less than an hour. that you can piece for using other projects. Here is some Christmas fabric that we put together with wedges in the same way that we just showed you. And then out of that we made a placemat, a pot holder, an oven mitt, and it was fun to quickly make a bunch of Christmas stockings because you're just laying your pattern on the fabric, cutting it out, and your project is nearly done, and you haven't pieced anything, you've just cut and sewn wedges. Here is a centerpiece. Of course, it's made of wedges, and there are 36 of them to make that circle. When you are sewing wedges to make a circle, you are always going to have a hole in the middle. And the reason for that is because your ruler does not start at 0, it starts at 3. So when I'm cutting my wedges and I'm lining them up at the tip of my ruler, the hole in the middle is going to be double that number. Why? Because from 3 to the middle 0 is 3 inches and to the other side is 6. So cutting on a 3 will give me a 6-inch circle. If I'm cutting on a 7, I'm automatically going to have a 14-inch circle because it's going to be double that number. Here's a little centerpiece for a birthday party, and we've cut the wedges and we sewed them together. I wanted a large hole in the center because my cake plate is 12 inches and I wanted to have 15 inches in diameter of circle showing to set the cake plate on. So this is what we did. So after we have sewn all of our 36 wedges together and we're looking at our hole in the middle, we're going to measure to make sure we know how big the hole is. Because I cut the ruler on the 7 mark with the fabric, I know there was a 14-inch hole. So I'm going to add 2 inches, and I would have 2 pieces of fabric. There you can see 16 inches square, and I'm going to take a 15-inch circle and trace it around on the wrong side of the fabric, and then I'm going to make a slit through the fabric, stitch exactly on the line all the way around, take my scissors and cut 1/4 inch out all the way around. When I turn it right side out, there's the slit that I made. I turned it right side out so it looked like this. Just right through that hole, turned it right side out and pressed it. And now I have a 15-inch circle that I can plop on top of a 14-inch hole. That gives me a 1/2 inch seam allowance on either side, and it's very easy. There's no hand sewing to it if you want to stitch it down. Earlier you saw where we had taken a 10-degree ruler and we used the wedge of the ruler itself to make other fabric. But you can also take your straight ruler and you can piece pieces together like this, wedges together, and then you can cut them in many different ways. I could cut them into strips for a very quick border. I could take my straight ruler and I could lay it diagonally across here, and as I cut that into strips, I'm cutting fabric for a bias border. If I take it and fold it in half, and I'm using my straight-edged ruler, I can cut at an angle, and I'm cutting here, moving it down and cutting it again. I'm actually cutting one, this would be cut across here, so you'd have 2 pieces, 1 and 1 reversed, and that gives you not exactly a chevron, but a chevron. So whether you're making a delightful Christmas tree skirt or a Christmas tree runner or any other theme, use your ruler in as many ways as you can think of. We're finding something new to do with that ruler every single day.